This week on Invisibilia, we have the tale of a singer and a journalist who take on terrorism in Somalia with a reality TV show a la American Idol. Can a reality show change reality? Find out on Invisibilia from NPR.
Support for On Being with Krista Tippett comes from the Fetzer Institute, helping build the spiritual foundation for a loving world. Fetzer envisions a world that embraces love as a guiding principle and animating force for our lives. A powerful love that helps us live in sacred relationship with ourselves, others, and the natural world. Learn more by visiting Fetzer.org.
We're increasingly attentive in our culture to the many faces of depression and its cousin, anxiety, and we're fluent in the languages of psychology and medication. But depression is profound spiritual territory, and that is much harder to speak about and can only be traced years onward. It is the shadow side of human vitality, and as such, teaches us about vitality. Depression may be possible, as Andrew Solomon says, for the same reason that love is possible. This is important reflection for our common life. Like many millions of people, depression is an essential thread of the life that is mine. And I think depression may be one of the most inadequate words in our vocabulary. The voices of this hour span rare, brave, and helpful perspective on depression and life. I spoke with them all a decade ago, and they feel resonant and important to resurface now. Anita Barrows is a poet, psychologist, and Buddhist practitioner. Parker Palmer is a Quaker author and educator. Andrew Solomon is my first guest. He's a journalist and author of epic books. His Noonday Demon, an Atlas of Depression, received the National Book Award and a Pulitzer Prize nomination.
And when I was going through the depression, I had the sense that many of the qualities by which I had defined myself were abandoning me, and that I was no longer the person whom I had previously been. And yet there was something within me that seemed to stay the same. Something essential remained at the core. And I thought, what is that essential thing?
Andrew Solomon first went public, writing about his depression in the New Yorker magazine in 1998. He described his breakdowns in excruciating detail and his extreme immersion in the then brave new world of antidepressant pharmacology. That article elicited over 1,000 letters from New Yorker readers. After the article and his subsequent book, Andrew Solomon was interviewed widely. What struck me as I listened, as a survivor of depression myself, was how Andrew Solomon's questioners tended to focus on his physical collapse and not on his eloquent insistence between the lines that depression for him was also a spiritually revealing experience. And Andrew Solomon is not a religious person. His mother's death when he was 27 triggered his first major depression. As he's recounted, she committed a planned suicide in the presence of him, his father, and his brother to end a bitter struggle with cancer. He now traces the onset of his depression from his incapacity to grieve the death of his mother.
The passage from grief into nothingness was very alarming and very strange. There was a sense, I still would have said, I'm terribly upset that my mother died and so on and so forth, but the feeling went out of it. And
right.
I think that's why when the feeling comes back, you think, oh, this is a soul, this is a spirit, this is something profound and alive, which returned to me after taking a leave of absence.
I think what I found really refreshing about your book, and something that I don't think is out there enough, is, what depression really is and what it really is not. It's not sadness, really. I think you say that the opposite of depression is human vitality.
It's an experience, I think, overall, of finding the most ordinary parts of life incredibly difficult, finding it difficult to eat, finding it difficult to get out of bed, finding it difficult and painful to go outside, being afraid all of the time and being overwhelmed all the time. And frequently, it's quite a sad experience to be afraid and overwhelmed all the time. Nonetheless, those are the essential qualities of it. It isn't, I think, primarily an experience of sadness.
Right.
And it teaches you how big emotion is. The profundity of the inner self, I suppose, would be the best way of putting it.
are passions, and maybe in a real classical sense of that word, also a way to talk about the largeness of emotion that you're describing?
I think passions are the only way to talk about it.
Okay.
The passion, which is the essential motivator for all human activity. In a sense, after you've been through a depression, it gives you a different relationship to the world. It gives you a different sense of how your interior monologue really determines everything, and you're left mystified as to where that interior monologue originates and where those passions come from and why they're so mutable and what it is within them that's immutable.
To keep going on this idea of what you learn and what it is and what it isn't, I mean, it seems like you also make a very clear case that this is not about simply, depression is not simply an escape from pain. That one thing you learn to appreciate is the fact of pain in life as one of the experiences of life that means that is a sign of being alive, right?
I had a very interesting conversation with a priest who's a friend of mine and was a teacher when I was at university. And I was talking to him at one point about the purpose of suffering. And he said to me, it's a very narrow-minded idea that comes out of religion that all suffering has a purpose. Suffering is just suffering. And after you've been through the suffering, perhaps your relation to the world has changed and perhaps it isn't. But suffering shouldn't be glorified. And I sort of quite strongly hold to that idea. I think there is something that's come out of the Judeo-Christian tradition that says there is a nobility in suffering in silence.